Here we go. Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Medium's Porch. This is Kathleen Bolt. I am your host here for the Lilydale radio podcast called The Medium's Porch. And we come to you every other Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. And you can find us both on Spiritual Medium YouTube page, but you can tune into the Lilydale Facebook page and find us there among the many other posts and programs that Lilydale offers you during the off season. And we would like to let you know at this time some of those people that are coming in to the podcast season. And we have, get your pens ready, get your phone out and your calendar, because we have Beyond is the title of Tiffany Hopkins' podcast, and she is going to be appearing on the Facebook page. Now, that Facebook address is Lilydale Assembly Inc. So that's on Facebook under that title. So that's the official Lilydale page. And that's the page where you'll find these video podcasts that we're doing, these programs. And Beyond is Tiffany's show. She is going to be appearing on the 11th and the 22nd of each month. And those of you that know numerology will enjoy that she's chosen those two master numbers as the dates that she's going to be producing and putting up her show for you. And that's at 6 p.m. And then on Sunday evenings, the 1st and the 3rd of the month, we have at 7 o'clock, we get to see Enlightening Your Way. And that's with Nancy Lombardo. So check in those programs. On Sunday, every 4th Sunday of the month, we get to find out more about who are these spiritualists. And that's the title of the program that Stacy Sherman at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time will be doing on the 4th Sunday of the month. Wednesdays are a big day. Wednesdays, we have Wednesday with Willa. She is doing her program Wednesdays with Willa at 10 a.m. in the morning. We've got Healing Temple Service streaming at 7 p.m. also on the Lilydale page. And with so much going on right now in the world, the atrocities all around the world, and more recently with our flooding and difficulties with those in the southern part of the United States, southeastern part, we could really use your prayers and love. So tune in at Wednesday night at 7 o'clock for the streaming from the Healing Temple, where they're doing the healing services. At 8 o'clock, you have yours truly and my special guests, and we do have one today, so I'm going to get there eventually. I'm moving my way along there, folks. We have Wake Up with Spirit on Thursday mornings, and that's at 10 a.m., and that's with Celeste Elliott. And then on Wake Up with Spirit is the title. And then Discovering Your Spirit bi-weekly with Brenda Reading. And that's Thursdays at 7 o'clock. And there's even more to come. So stay tuned. I know Angie Apt was someone that did a program last year. I don't have her specifics right now, but no doubt she'll be back to join us as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to a fantastic medium. He also does a number of other things that are well worth learning more about. So stick around as we move forward now into our guest portion of the program. And our guest today is Dan Johnson. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's always wonderful to experience your bright, uplifting energy on this beautiful day here in Chicago.
Thank you. I'm going to take a second to tell our readers a little more about you here. We have the privilege of having you here as a bridge between worlds. And I love that you said it that way, because that's what many of us do, but I know you're doing it in several different ways. So we're going to talk more about that. You are a tarot reader, a psychic, an evidential medium, you're a past life regressionist, a spiritualist minister, and a neuroscience-based coach. You grew up with a sensitivity to energy, and you studied metaphysics and spirituality at the, okay, you're going to have to help me with this, Dan. Is it Psychia or?
Perfect. Psychia Mystery School. Yes, indeed.
Okay. Psychia Mystery School, builders of the Aditum. Did I say that right?
Aditum, but I try to throw those words in just to flip up any
interest. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Aditum. Sure.
Okay, and then spiritualist churches around the States and many spiritual teachers throughout the world. So you've been well absorbed in this practice and the study of mediumship and the advancement of your spirituality. Dan teaches workshops on psychic development, mediumship, tarot, dream work, and soul purpose. So definitely reach out to him. Today, he's going to tell us a little bit more about all of that. So, Dan, I'd love to explore, since we were just talking about your background,
Sure.
what is the Psyche Mystery School? Tell us a little more about that.
Psyche Mystery School was founded by Jacqueline Small, and she is an author and metaphysical person. She did a lot of work with healers as well and does holotropic breath work. And for a number of years, I studied in her mystery school, and we covered everything from sacred geometry, energy, tarot, numerology, and really metaphysical concepts on a deeper level. It was a very immersive experience, and it was so cool, not one, just to be in her presence and her energy. You know how when you have that teacher that just creates a space that is so magical and mystical and spiritual, it's nice to dive into that. And then to be there with 30, 35 other students over a period of time, over years, was really a cool and life-changing experience. So I owe a debt of gratitude to Jacqueline Small and the Psyche Mystery School.
Nice. And was this the first introduction you had to the formal honing of your faculties as a medium and a psychic?
I actually had to be kicked in the behind to get into this work, quite honestly. I remember as a young kid, I watched a Charlie Chan movie, black and white. It was on late at night with my mom. And during the movie, some characters used a Ouija board. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I asked mom, what is that? And so that got me interested in kind of spiritual communication. And as a young child, I was always sensitive to energy. When you grow up and you know that you're different than other people, in my case, I'm gay and I always had to sense the energy of the room. Is it safe? Are these people safe?
Oh,
You're very sensitive to energy. That was always a part of my life, but it wasn't until I saw that movie with my mom that I like, oh, there's something more to this. And then I had judgment about this because maybe some of you listening or watching are in the same boat. You're the only one in the family who is aware of spirit or aware of energy. It's like a fish out of water. So I kind of kept it to myself. And it wasn't until I was 30 years old, I was taking some Gestalt psychology training, a 3-year intensive. And during that training, you are supervised. And my supervisor said, Dan, there's part of you that you are cutting off, and that is your energetic self, your connection to spirit. And that supervisor dared me as an assignment to give them a tarot reading. And they knew I needed that little edge or that little push to push me over to dive into what I really wanted to do and be all my life, but I was afraid to, or I had judgment, or I was the only one. So that got me hooked on tarot. And then along those journeys, I sought out authors throughout the world. I flew out to where they taught, wherever they were. I was fortunate enough to have a lot of frequent flyer miles. And then through my journey, I learned about Jacqueline Small's Psyche Mystery School. I saw her speak and I was mesmerized. And when you meet a teacher and you really have a vibrational match with, like, oh, I want some more of that. I want to learn more from this person. So that introduced me to things beyond tarot and numerology, as I said, sacred geometry and metaphysics in general. And then, as many of us on the spiritual path experience, we go through that time where we're absolutely miserable. I was in a job that just sucked the life out of me.
yeah.
And some of you might be able to relate to that. And my saving grace was Tuesday nights. I learned about the local spiritualist church, and they held a Tuesday night development class. And that gave me life. I lived for Tuesday nights. And that's where I learned about mediumship and other forms of spirit communication. So it's kind of through that long journey, sometimes painful, but sometimes we're in those painful situations, we're seeking out answers or it's time for growth. And through that long journey, that's how I came to know more about spirit communication and then sought out teachers and practiced on my own.
That's fabulous. And I love that you had that background with all the metaphysics, because obviously that gives you a strong foundation in thinking symbolically, thinking metaphorically, noticing patterns, moving that into the world of meaning. and then you bring your spirit to it. So I just love that. And it makes sense that you would have been drawn to the tarot after that kind of background as well, because there's so much in the tarot. Can you tell us a little more? We'll come back to mediumship,
Sure.
but can you tell us a little more about the tarot? Because it is a very, I suppose, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think of tarot as something that can be extremely simple to work with or extremely complex, depending on what you're doing, how you're doing it, and who in the spirit world is influencing you, even in that case. So tell us more a little bit about tarot.
So tarot for me was a mystical doorway for me. For me, I like to think of tarot as my expanded self, that part of me that lives eternally, wants to communicate with me. And one of the methods that it can communicate with me and with my clients is through the tarot. I'm particularly drawn to the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck because the illustrations on that deck really speak to me. The artist, Pamela Coleman Smith, just had a mystical way of illustrating. And she was also a synesthete, which is a mouthful. But what that means is she was able to experience one sense with another. So an example might be she could hear color, or when she heard music, she could translate that into artwork. So you experience one sense through another sense. And I think part of that talent for me transferred into her artwork on this tarot deck. And I also know that that tarot deck was deliberately designed to evoke certain responses from people and to symbolize specific things. And that really spoke to me as well. So a long answer to your question. Oh, you talked about can tarot be complex? I like to tell folks that tarot tells us the way the wind is blowing, and then you can set your sail in any direction you wish. So a lot of folks would like to think everything's predestined and a tarot reading is going to tell me what's going to happen no matter what. I see everything as energy. We all have free will, but the tarot can give us an indication of the direction the energy in our life is moving. And if we like it, we keep doing the same thing. If we don't like the way the wind is blowing, we can set our sail and go in any direction that we like. So for me, there are several levels of a tarot reading. There's a spiritual level when we look at kind of a spiritual cause from a 100,000-foot view, what's really happening from a spiritual aspect. We can look at tarot from an intellectual aspect. That's when we study the symbols and meanings and we can recall them in our brains intellectually. We can look at tarot from an emotional aspect. What emotions is it stirring up within me? What emotions does it represent? What emotions is energy in motion? Is this a direction that I want to follow? There's also a therapeutic aspect for tarot. One of my great teachers was Mary Greer, and she's written a number of books, but she taught us the therapeutic or empowerment method of reading tarot, where the tarot can illustrate what's going on in your life in the moment, and it also can illustrate the key. And so the key to breaking through any obstacle or challenge is also right in front of you, and ways of working with that helps you from a therapeutic standpoint to break through any kind of obstacles, or sometimes we feel like we've run into a brick wall. So many levels, many ways of reading tarot. When I teach tarot, I start with an intuitive method that the tarot cards are an activator. What do they activate within your intuition? And we can trust that as your guidance. All of those methods have value, and I'd like to combine all of them. But there, as you mentioned, there are many levels. It can be as complicated or as simple as we like to make it out to be.
There's quite a history with tarot too. I mean, I love how you've described the synesthesia that goes on in the illustrations. I didn't know that, and I think that's fabulous. I mean, that really shows another kind of sensitivity, and that vibration is in the cards, which I think is super cool. Now, I know we don't tend to use them as spiritual mediums for giving readings, at least those of us in Lilydale. We don't need a
Yes.
tool. We don't use a tool.
Right.
However, I have in the past. That's actually how we met, was through tarot. And yeah, so I have used them in the past, although I use them less now. But I do find it fascinating because, can I tell you a little anecdote?
Sure. Yeah.
During COVID, I was registered to go to study with Mavis Patilla again in England, and then we were all shut down. But usually when I go to do something important like that, I use my free will and I make the decision and I do the research and then I feel it out, and it all felt okay. And then I thought, well, I didn't pull any tarot cards on it. So I thought, well, let's just pull a card. I got the Tower. Now you can tell the guests a little bit about Tower in a second, but I got the Tower card. And I was like, oh, I was rushing it. I wasn't being reverent enough. I better do this again. And I shuffled again. And then I sat down formally and I went through the whole protocol of being in tune because I was just kind of winging it, which I thought, well, yeah, I was being irreverent. So I'll do this right. Sat down, did it. Guess which card came up?
Hello,
The Tower.
Tower. Yep. Yeah. What are the odds, right? Mm-hmm.
And soon enough, surely, all the airports shut down and, I wasn't going anywhere.
Yes. Yeah. Disruption,
Yeah.
things that we are tied to kind of fall away, but we're always left with at the core what we really need. But yeah, there's usually some disruption that can happen. It's a bumpy ride when you get that tarot card quite often.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be scary. It's wisdom, right? It's knowledge. It's an awareness. It's knowing, okay, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to be fulfilled. Where can I go from here? Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think of it as bringing to our awareness, either confirming what we know or bringing to our awareness what we're not aware of, but would be beneficial for us to know. In that case, it's beneficial to know, there might be a few bumps up ahead. And yes, indeed, COVID hit and it was a little bit bumpy.
Yep,
But there's
nice.
always, but there's always that aspect of it that even though I know it's bumpy ahead, the tarot card also tells me I will be fine. Things that I was attached to in the moment, they might fall away or disappear. It might be bumpy, but I will be fine. The tarot doesn't come down, or the tower doesn't come down, but aspects of it do. And those are the things that aren't at the essential core. Your core will persevere. So yeah, it gives some insight. And as you mentioned, as mediums, we don't use tarot to communicate with people from the other side. I like seeing tarot as a way of my expanded self, my eternal self, Akashic records wise, what's up for me. And it's helpful reflection, helpful guidepost, and a helpful place to bounce off of so I can make more informed decisions moving forward.
I like that very much because spirit can't tell you what to do with your life. They can't, it's not ethical, and nor should they, because we have personal responsibility. So having a tool like that is like tarot is nice because if you have something coming up, I like thinking of it as being able to plot out my plan, right? I ask questions, I get feedback, I learn about the things that I don't even realize I'm carrying or thinking about the situation. So it gives me insight into myself sometimes when I'm actually using it. I don't use it that much, but every once in a while, like if something big comes up, I'll take a look and I'll reflect. How do you use it in your own life?
For me, it's a nice timeout, for me to connect with myself, to be still. In our workaday world, it's all about action and distraction. And so when I'm with the tarot, I'm in a meditative state. I'm one with my own self, my own intuition, my own expanded self. And the tarot brings to me what I may not have been aware of because I've been too busy or too distracted. So it's a nice meditative tool that I like to come back to and journal. And I also expand on what the cards mean, what comes up for me, what intuitively, what come to mind. And it helps me make some more informed decisions on what I want to do as I move forward in achieving the goals and the kind of life that I like to live.
Do you have any advice for people that want to do the same using the tarot? Say they've gone, maybe they're not tuned in or trained formally as a medium or a psychic, but they went out, got a pack, friend gave them a pack. Do you have suggestions for them, little tips or tricks that you could share with them about using it on an everyday basis or in a situational basis?
Sure. The first, like I mentioned, there are many levels of reading tarot. So as you're beginning, it's helpful to look at each cards and notice your reaction. Notice your energetic reaction to each card and what comes up into your awareness. Maybe it's a thought, maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a memory, maybe it's a song lyric. Notice your response to each card and trust that. It's almost like your expanded self, that part of you that is eternal, or the Akashic records are saying, we want to communicate with you. And one of the languages we're going to use is the tarot. So trust what impressions you get from that card. And it doesn't matter if other people have the same impressions. This is your own connection to your own guidance. So trust that as a basic step. So you can jot down those. Find books that you're intuitively drawn to when it comes to tarot. I specifically like Mary Greer's Tarot for Yourself book that really helps you come to an understanding of what tarot means for yourself. And then beyond that, you can read as many books on tarot that give meanings and things. That's more of an intellectual approach. I like to see that as added, I don't want to say filler, added options for each of the cards, but primarily trust what the cards mean for yourself as you explore. And then also know that the power is within you, not within the cards. So it's just a language, but that power, that energy that comes to you is within yourself, and to trust that. The power is not in that printed card, it is within you. I think that's important for us folks to learn. And also be aware of what's myth and what is fact when it comes to tarot. There's a lot of misinformation out there about tarot, especially in movies. You know, you see that death card. Oh, that means someone's going to get killed or shot or die. Not necessarily. You know, the death card means clearing away the old to make way for something new. So if I get the death card, it might be I have to give up my old way of thinking if I want to achieve something that I want to achieve. Or I have to give up what no longer serves me, kind of die to my old self to create the new self that I want to moving forward. So it's not necessarily a physical death, it's a transition, clearing away the old to make way for the new. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense to me. And the expression of death, if you're coming at it from a spiritual perspective, it really is just a closure to something. So we like to think in the physical world that death means ending. But if you have a spiritual upbringing or spiritual background or spiritualist background,
Yes.
you know that there is a continuity of life hereafter beyond the physical form. Right. But when you use it, one of the things I loved about, and this is what I was about to say, is that with tarot, I feel like you can come at it at any level, right? So if I'm talking about my life, or if I'm talking about this is something, I'm all over the place. I'm so excited. We can talk about tarot. Yeah, and I'm listening to you too talk about it. These layers that we come to in life, like this is my life related to my family. This is my life related to my career. This is my life related to my personal development or my health or any parts of these life that we have. I find the tarot is really great at narrowing it down because you ask that question. And whatever that question is, so if you get the death card while you're talking to someone about, say, their career, then we're seeing closure to something based on what else is influencing that based on the cards around it. So we could go to another place and the death card may show up and it may just mean you need to stop doing this habit because it's not productive for you, right? And again, based on the cards around it. So I love the flexibility that the symbology, the metaphor, and the outside influences of the card offer, because in life, that's what happens, right? We have an individual context, but that context is being influenced by everything going on around you. Yes, you have free will, and you have all these things around you that are implicating possibilities for you. So I just love the tarot for that reason.
Yeah. And, you know, death could simply be about transition. This is a transition from one thing to another. Like as spiritualists, we know, you know, our essence, lives on, we're eternal beings. So there is no such thing as death, meaning full stop. We are eternal beings. So yeah, there's lots of levels to look at it, but I want to circle back to something important. I think you mentioned just a little bit ago too about, you know, spirit telling us what to do. You know, there are some times when I'll be doing a reading, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, where the tarot will present some options or the way the wind is blowing, and I'll let clients know, what do you choose to do? What direction would you like to go? And would you like to explore some options and the energy behind each of those options? But occasionally you'll get that client who will say, just tell me what to do. What's spirit telling me what to do? I don't like this because spirit's not telling me what to do. When in reality, spirit is saying, you can go this direction, option A, or option B, or option C. They're all available to you. It just depends on what experience you want to have. If you go with option A, here's an energetic experience that you'll have. If you go with option B, this energetic experience. So for me, using a tool like the tarot is really about empowerment and power. I'm really big on self-empowerment and claiming your power, that it is a helpful feeder for you to make an informed decision and choices moving forward, versus saying you have no power, you're powerless, this is the way it's got to be. This is the way the wind's blowing, you've got the power to set your sail. So I always like to let clients know that, because occasionally there'll be a client who like gets a little irritated. It's like, well, just tell me what to do. It's like, that's not what we're here to do. We're we're exploring options and energy, then you get to decide what you'd like to do. And we can explore what those options are, but the ultimate choice is up to you. So anyone who comes to me for a reading knows or what comes through is not going to be what you have to do. This is the way the wind is blowing, what you choose to do.
How do you approach those people that want you to tell their future?
I'll say that tarot can give an indication of, as things are right now, the way the energy is set up and movement, what's in motion. Here is a likely outcome, but it's not predestined. If you like, let's say you are sailing across Lake Michigan. I'm looking at Lake Michigan outside my window right now. If you want to go to Michigan and you know the wind is coming from the west, you need to set your sail so that even though the wind is coming from the west, you can go right across the lake to the state of Michigan. The same thing with tarot. You can, here are the forces, here are the energies set up to either help you or complement you on what you wanting to achieve. Here are some forces or energies that you need to be aware of that might be obstacles or bumps in the road. What do you choose to do? How do you set your sail? How do you navigate? So tarot helps us navigate toward the desired future that we want. And I do find that, you get a sense of what's up ahead, what's coming. If someone is seeking, more love in their life or abundance, you kind of get a sense of, oh, you're on the right track, or there's some flow here. You also get a sense of, there's some stoppers, and let's explore what those stoppers are to help you break through to achieving more abundance or more love or romantic life. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Would you be available to take calls on tarot if we go to your website at this time?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so people can find you. We're going to mention it again at the end, but people can find you on your website. Do you want to tell us your website for those listening in and curious about tarot right now?
Sure. My website is danjohnson.me, M-E.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Now, you mentioned about tarot being something that can support our spirit. You got drawn into mediumship. Tell us a little bit more about how that transition happened. I know you said you went to the churches and you started going Tuesday nights, looking forward to that. But where did it all go from there?
I saw mediumship demonstrated in my local church, and I took a development class and learned mediumship skills. And then as with tarot, I started seeking out teachers. I would go to conferences, see who I resonated with, and I'd study with them. And then I'd say, if you were to go to a teacher, who would you recommend? And so through that, I learned about Lily Dale. And so I've been coming to Lily Dale for quite a long time now. And through that exposure at Lily Dale, I sought out teachers that really resonated with me. And what I really appreciated as along my journey, there are many different styles to mediumship for me. And I appreciated those teachers that helped me claim my power and reminded me, everyone can do this. Sometimes we all like to feel special. I'm the only one. But everyone has that muscle. It's like playing the piano or a sport. Some people are more natural with it. Some people might be more accurate or better than others, but we can all do this. And I really appreciated those teachers that reminded me of that and helped me stand in my power and be fearless in the information that I'm getting and to trust what I'm getting from spirit more than the immediate reaction I'm getting from the audience or the person sitting across from me. Because when I trust spirit absolutely, I am on fire. I am on, and I know I'm not disregarding what's happening. Certainly, I want the client to understand what's coming through, but it might be I'm getting an information from spirit. I might not be languaging it quite the right way for the person to recognize, or they may not recognize it until after the reading is over and they call or email me back and saying, oh, duh, you're talking about Scott. Oh, that's my brother. And I couldn't think of it at the time. So, we all have that spiritual amnesia at times. So learning through teachers, seeing people in doing their work, and really admiring those who are in integrity. And, there's always various levels of mediums and mediumship out there. I just admire folks who are in integrity and are serving spirit. And once I got started, it was like eternal journey. There's so much more to learn, and I'll never know everything there is about tarot. I'll never know everything there is to know about mediumship. I'm always learning, but I always appreciate spirit communication and being done well, and as a service to others. It's a service to spirit to help them communicate with folks here on this side, and it's also a service to people on this side who like those reminders or the evidence that their spirit loved one is eternal and it does live on.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Lovely. Yeah. It's a very powerful exchange between spirit and the individuals you're sitting with. And it's such a privilege to be a part in the center of it, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's a collaboration. I recently read for a group and I got up on the podium. There were several mediums, but I got up on the podium and I just had to acknowledge, guys, you are deader than the dead people on the other side. We had to raise the energy. So
Yes.
there's a collaboration that takes place too. Yes, you're connected with spirit, you're serving spirit, but there's also a connection and a throughway through the people you're reading for, and we all have to be in it. It reminds me back many years ago now when I was reading tarot. I was reading tarot I was invited to read tarot for an organization that was out of town where I did not live, but they scheduled me and I had a bunch of clients, and there was one client where it felt like I was banging my head against the wall. It's like, oh, this is like pushing a noodle uphill. This is like dragging. What is going on? And the client after the reading said, Dan, that was a fantastic reading. I want to tell you, I came here to debunk you. So if it was difficult, it's because I was not cooperating. And even though I wasn't cooperating, you gave me a great reading. So I learned
Wow.
at that point, I was like, if this is a struggle, there's something going on. Either the client themselves are either testing me or not into this fully, or sometimes it could be the spirit people on the other side. If it's a mediumship reading, the people on the other side have some hesitancy to come forward. Maybe they did not treat you, the client, very well, but to trust that. And so anyone learning mediumship, or even if you're reading tarot, when it feels like you're up against a brick wall or it's tough or you're having to push through, that's the message. There's a message in that very experience. Trust that. It's not that you're not doing well. There's meaning in that, and to trust that. And I learned early on in my career to call it out, to put it out on the table. After that, if it felt like I was pulling teeth, I just put it on the table and we'd kind of uncover what was really going on. And oftentimes the person energetically had their arms crossed, even though they're paying for a reading. So you just invite people to relax and be open. And that makes the process a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah, I think the idea of coming in with expectation, cynicism, obviously, that man was really putting you to the test and you
Yeah.
were brave enough to pursue and persist. So I usually let people go at that point, but I have that conversation with them. Yeah, absolutely. But it's beautiful to know that, we're getting the education out there these days. We're talking about this, we're letting people know. But that idea of having an expectation when you come in, I mean, it's the same as life, right? I mean, if we only have one way of seeing things or only one way that it needs to get done, we're going to be limiting ourselves quite a bit. And it certainly limits the medium and the spirit world from reaching you if you're going in having specific expectations, whether it's based on hearing somebody else, maybe you heard a TV program with a medium on it and you want it to sound exactly the same, or for the information to come through it, but a specific person. I recently had someone that had someone come through and I was only a third through it. They recognized the person, shook their head and said, no, I don't want to talk to them.
Right.
And I said, do you recognize them? They said, no. And I'm like, well, then if you don't recognize them, how do you know you want to talk to them? So there was
Exactly.
this real resistance in the person. And I realized, I'm not going to be able to help you today because um, I'm not your person to push through that. I'm not going to do that because there's a reason you're in that space. And not being a counselor myself, I'm not going to be the person that's going to open that. So yeah, it's really important to recognize, I think, in whatever position you're in, that it is collaborative and that we can only do so much, that there's only so much as a medium, only as a client, only as spirit, really, in a way that we can all come together and make this work. I always think of it as a three-way call or a conference call, right?
Absolutely.
Where
Yep.
each one of us has to show up for this because we're not just going to talk for the sake of talking.
Sure.
And I love that you've mentioned that experience where spirit is a little reticent to come through. I've had that many times. And it's because of how they have behaved. There could be a number of reasons, right? Maybe they don't want to upset that person. Maybe they don't want to make them more sad or sadder, if that's
Or
proper.
sometimes when they're on the earth plane, they didn't speak.
Correct.
You didn't communicate, or they were a person of few words. So, I like that we're talking about that to be in our power. We're comfortable enough to say, this reading isn't working. I don't think I'm the right reader for you, or it doesn't seem to be flowing. Let's put that out on the table. It takes power, and it takes confidence to know that I'm powerful enough and confident enough to know in my abilities, and trust in spirit to know there's something off. And
Yeah.
with that, let's explore what that is. And if the client is willing to explore it, great. If not, then okay, I may not be the right reader for you. Let me recommend someone else to you. Or sometimes I won't recommend someone else if I don't think that they're going to cooperate with them either. But yeah, it's trusting that. I think just trusting spirit, I think, is so, so key. And it takes a lot of us journey, or almost a lifetime, to get to that place where we absolutely trust spirit.
I had a big proof of that very thing when a man spent 2 hours at a psychic fair. This was years ago, but he spent 2 hours apparently going through the Toronto Psychic Fair, and it was massive, looking for the medium for him. And I guess he decided I was that person. So we hit it off interpersonally fine. He came in, chatty. We sat down, started to read, and it was crickets. I had nobody showing up. I was blown away. I was like, there's no one here. And we were both talking and diatribing about, like, how does this happen? Why is this happening? I spent 2 hours, he said. And I said, well, listen, this has never happened to me. However, there must be a reason for it. So off he went, and he decided to call me again a couple months later. And so much had changed in his life that when he called me and we sat down to do it again, it was like a flood of information, and like a party of people were coming through. And it turns out that he had come to that fair with a particular person with a particular problem. That person was with them when he wanted to find out about this problem. But more importantly, what ended up happening is spirit was clearly, as we look at it retroactively, spirit was clearly waiting for him to make the decision he needed to make, to go through the motions, because he was coming to me to find out about this particular thing that was going on in his life. And
Right.
spirit didn't show up. I was so surprised. I've never had that happen. But when I talked to him 2 months later, they were all applauding him, saying, good decision, well done. We were there with you. We saw you do it, bravo. And it totally made sense at that point that spirit knew that he had to take personal responsibility. And that circumstance also wasn't the right circumstance to bring the subject up, because he would have included the other person that wasn't to be a part of the decision.
Right.
So it's just fascinating watching the intelligence of spirit work its way through.
And that reminds me too, sometimes we're not to know.
Right.
Sometimes client will ask a question, you can check in with spirit and your mediumship, and it's like, get nothing. Or sometimes spirit will say, we're not to know right now. And as a strong medium, it's important for us to be able to share, this is what I'm getting from spirit. I'd love to be able to tell you give you an answer that you like, but spirit is telling me very clearly, we're not to know right now. For whatever reason, we're not to know the answer right now. So it might be a timing issue like you experienced. It might be something that we're not to know, or we don't know the way the wind is blowing right now, so spirit isn't giving us indication. So it's trusting all of those experiences, and then trusting when we're not to know, or the timing issue like you experienced, I think again shows power in your mediumship versus just making something up to make yourself look good. Trusting that every single experience is in service to you and to your client. Spirit always has your back, always, always, always. And trust that if I'm not to know, spirit knows what's going on with me. And if I'm not to know right now, trust that. I may not be happy about it, but trust that for now. And maybe, like you mentioned, a week or two or a month or two later, it will become clear to me.
Mm-hmm. And that brings me to the statement that mediumship is a path to spirituality, spiritual development, spiritual growth, and not for the other person, but the person ourselves as mediums. This is an opportunity for us to learn to trust, for us to grow. Would you like to talk a little more about your experience with personal spiritual development and your spirituality through mediumship?
Yeah, I learned from one of my earliest teachers. Her name was Sonia Choquette, and this was a psychic development class, but she gave a very important piece of advice. She said, expect, trust, and act. And that has been a thread running through my entire spiritual development, to expect that I will have spirit communication, the guidance that I need, to trust it, and then to act on it. And that helps strengthen my mediumship abilities or psychic abilities. You know, I'm sure you've had experiences where clients get information from spirits and they keep gathering information, but they don't do anything with it. And then they wonder why their own connection to spirit isn't as strong, as because you're not trusting on it and you're not acting on it. So my spiritual journey has been from a young age, feeling like I'm different than anyone else, being highly sensitive to energy, feeling like a fish out of water. I am the only medium in my entire family, and I'm going cousins, grandparents, aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews. I'm the oddball. It's just me. So it's nice that they're like, okay, yeah, Dan, they'll smile and nod, but I'm the only one. So again, I just want to share, if anyone's listening to this, that's okay. That happens. And so sometimes there's a reason for that too. You have to be in an environment of what you are not to really hone in what you are. So being sensitive to energy and seeking out, I love learning and always taking the initiative to learn from teachers, going to them any way I could. Back in those days, I had to fly. Now you can have access via Zoom. Reading, and then really trusting my own guidance, what fits for me and what doesn't, what's truth for me or what isn't, and trusting my own guidance system on when it comes to my own spiritual journey. Then, of course, ever since my very first psychic class I went to, half the class thought I was a minister. And I said, there is no way. I would never be a minister. Don't call me a minister. And they're like, well, you were at least a minister in your past life. And Sonia Choquette told me I was a monk in a past life. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not me. Well, I'm an ordained spiritualist minister for City of Light Spiritualist Church. You know, sometimes you know it inside, but you kind of fight against it. And you take that journey and come full circle and embrace what you are all the time. And so for some of us, we know what we are. We're spiritual beings. We're connected to spirit. We can communicate with spirit, but we deny it, or we look the other way, or pretend it's not there. But it does have a way of coming back. And once you accept that and explore that and grow that, then you have much more peace, and life is much more magical, and you bring magical people into your life. But there are, like for me in my journey for the first 30 years of my life, I just like, that is not me. No, 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 that's too weird. That's too far out. And then once I embraced it, it's like, it's the most natural thing in the world. The way people live in Lilydale with all those message services and the healing temple, to me, that's the most natural way of living life, the most natural way. I love when I come to Lilydale. This is the way I think life is meant to be lived. So I don't have to watch TV and I'm not hooked to my phone. I can just be and experience and immerse myself with spirit. I think that is the most natural way to be. So that's what I'm always trying to bring more into my life, no matter where I am, but also help my clients bring more of that into their own lives, because I feel that there's such a craving for that in the world today.
Yeah, there's really a kindred quality to hanging out with your tribe, so to speak.
Yes.
You could be having coffee and then say, oh, I've got to go. I have to get home to do my sitting in the power session, or I'm watching this webinar about something spiritual, and you could excuse yourself and everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, see you later, not questioning, not doing anything of difference there. Now, you yourself, how do you sustain, and I know everybody does this a little differently, but how do you sustain the development of your faculties in a very personal routine or a personal way of sustaining yourself spiritually?
Well, when I'm traveling, I try to serve at whatever spiritualist church or churches are nearby. That keeps me connected, keeps me growing. It also helps me adapt to different audiences and different energies of different audiences. I am always learning and seeking learning opportunities. I'm also a spiritual director, help people guide people or mentor people on their spiritual path. And so there are organizations like Spiritual Directors International that have other teachings and opportunities to learn in other communities. So I try to immerse myself in communities of people, opportunities, learning opportunities, and then try to be kind and good to myself. Like I'm sitting here, where I live overlooks Lake Michigan. You look out my window, it looks like an ocean. So spending time in nature is a way that I nurture that as well. And I have to be quite honest, when you have the love of a wonderful partner who is also spiritually connected, it's nice to have those conversations over dinner or before you're going to bed, or when you're eating breakfast in the morning, or when you're in the car together. That is really, I'm grateful for having that in my life as well. And I also had to learn from a young age, my spiritual community is worldwide. Where I live specifically right now in this moment, there aren't a lot of people that I can connect with on a spiritual level. I don't have spiritual community in, let's say, a 1 mile radius of where I live. But beyond that, I do. And that's another reason why I love spending time in Lilydale, is that, these people get me. This is home for me. So finding that community for me, and if anyone's listening, I think having that community, as you mentioned, is real important, however you find it. And it does not have to be the person you live with. And for me, it's definitely not my immediate family. I love them dearly, but we can't talk this spirit stuff. But finding those that you resonate with, I think, is real important. And reading, meditating, and I will say working with tarot has been, for more than 30 years, has been a way for me to stay connected to spirit. No matter what I do, coming back to the tarot, there's always a new layer, something new to learn. And those illustrations on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck always have a way of bringing a mystical experience and insight for me.
Would you say that the tarot is your greatest contributor to your spiritual journey, or is there something else, or an experience?
I would say what the greatest contributors to my spiritual journey were those times when life felt like hell. And I've been through many of those times, whether it's when I was working in corporate America, when often it's been, I will say, going into business for myself has been the biggest spiritual quantum leap for me, because when you go into business for yourself, all of your fears are thrust in your face all the time, all along the way. Even though you feel like, okay, I've met that fear, I've conquered that fear, I've worked through it. Here it is again at a new level. So, it would be nice to say, yeah, I go and meditate and that's where I get enlightenment. But my biggest contributor to my spiritual journey has been being in business for myself, when everything that I was afraid of or thought I was afraid of is coming up, and it gives me an opportunity to work through it and claim more of myself and claim more of my power. That's not to say my spiritual teachers, my mediumship teachers, spiritualist churches, tarot teachers, psychic teachers haven't been a big influence, the mystery school. But I have to say, when the rubber meets the road here on the earth plane, that's the greatest spiritual journey for me, contributor to my spiritual journey.
Nice. And then you had mentioned, as you were talking about that, you had mentioned that you do activities, teaching people, working through, educating others as a way of also developing and continuing to develop, as well as serving others. You host a monthly spiritual wisdom circle.
I do.
I'm intrigued. What is it all about?
It's called the Spirit Wisdom Circle, and it's an open community to anyone who wants to immerse themselves in spirit, spiritual healing, and get messages from spirit. So whoever shows up that month, that's our group for the week, and we go through a process where we affirm our own power and connection to spirit. We talk about what we want to manifest over the next month and go through a ritual through that process. We have a brief time for spiritual healing, knowing that me, Dan, I'm not a spiritual healer. The healing energy comes from source, and I can direct that through me, and we experience that energy. And then the closing portion of the wisdom circle is everyone who wants to can ask a question, and they will get answers from the other folks in the group, from the spirit realm or from a psychic intuitive perspective. So it's a once a month community, a kind of drop-in community where folks can experience spirit, but also practice their skills in mediumship and or their intuitive abilities. And that's the second Thursday of each month. Oh, sorry.
Second
Thursday of each month.
Second Thursday. And how do we get access to this?
Spiritwisdomcircle.com will bring you to the page of my website where the Zoom details are listed, and also listed on Instagram for Spirit Wisdom Circle, and Facebook page Spirit Wisdom Circle as well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, of course. And then you also are a neuroscience-based coach. Now, is that the entrepreneurial work you were speaking of earlier?
That is part of my entrepreneurial work, leadership development. I started my own business in 2002, 2003. And for many years, I went through a lot of training, leadership development. I went through a lot of formal coach training, accredited training, and added a layer called neuroscience-based coaching, which is about how the brain works and how neuroscientists are understanding how our brain works. And when people come to me for coaching, they want to know, why do I keep doing this behavior? Why do I have this habit? I had an attorney who said, why do I always blow up in people's faces? Why do I always get triggered? And so neuroscience can provide more of a scientific explanation of what's happening. So my attorney client who says, why do I always blow up? Well, it's because they were experiencing something called amygdala hijack. There's a part of our brain that when we feel threatened, makes us lash out. And so once he could understand that from a scientific standpoint, he was more open to some coaching techniques on how to remain calm and centered during that time. Another aspect I love about neuroscience is a lot of it is about energy. Neuroscience coaching, one of the precepts is your brain is either working for you or it's working against you. And what I mean by that is your brain can help you lean into something and uplift your energy, or your brain can zap your energy and just make you push back. So it could be your limiting beliefs, your limiting thoughts. When you look at it from a neuroscience perspective, let me make my brain work for me more often. Let me lean in. Let me uplift myself. And traditionally, we think of the brain as having left and right brain. Left brain is analytical, right brain is more artistic. Well, neuroscientists say, not quite true. There are networks in the brain, two different networks that encompass all parts of the brain, the default mode network and task positive network. Those are the networks that have kind of differences from seeing the whole picture to getting down to the nitty-gritty details. And I find that when I'm coaching folks, helping to explain some of the brain stuff behind it helps them be more open to doing some techniques, coaching techniques to help move forward. And then, quite honestly, I am a neuroscience-based coach. I have formal training in that, certified neurotransformational coach. But I will tell you, 99 out of 100 people that I work with, they all want spiritual strength, spiritual insight. They'll say, I want what you have, Dan. I can't quite language it, but I want what you have, that quiet confidence, that sense, that power. And it really comes down to a spiritual journey. So the neuroscience helps me explain biologically what might be happening in their brain, but the outcome that they want is really more of a spiritual nature, which is kind of cool to me to be able to meld
I wouldn't have
those.
expected that. I mean, obviously, there's going to be people that would be drawn to you anyway for coaching. But I wouldn't have expected those coming in from that scientific standpoint or for that scientific support would actually start. Well, I guess if I really think about it, we're all needing that, right? We're all needing that spiritual connection, that sense of spiritual value, meaning, and empowerment. So yeah, that's wonderful that you're offering. So you have a different client base then that's now finding their way to spirituality through the teachings that you're offering and the coaching that you're offering.
One of the most interesting things for me has been I can work in a corporate environment, working with leaders and executives, all ages, all genders, and they experience me. And then after working with me, they'll kind of approach me and say, and they'll talk about the spiritual aspects as if it's something to be ashamed of. And so when I can say I'm a neuroscience-based coach, that gives people permission to work with me, even though their goal is of a spiritual nature. But because outwardly they can say, oh, I'm working with a neuroscience-based coach, they at the outset feel less shame, which is one of the healing fields we work with in neuroscience, about working on themselves and their spiritual journey, because languaging it in a way that they feel is acceptable to the outer world gives them permission to be vulnerable and explore with me. So there is validity to neuroscience-based coaching techniques, absolutely. But because I can say it in that way, people feel comfortable exploring their spiritual journey, knowing that it's about neuroscience.
Right. There's a scientific relevance to it.
Yeah.
Maybe they were raised knowing there was such a thing as science, but spirituality was frowned upon or something. I have a question for you. I'm curious about, there's a lot of people that come to this work doing mediumship, doing psychic work, doing healing, that have had traumatic pasts and a lot of drama or dynamics around that. And so my understanding is that to survive the brain puts you in a position where it learns to metabolize the information it's getting and find a placement for it. So a lot of people that do this work, I'm not even really sure my question, I suppose. It's just that bringing that to attention, that there's a neurological basis for maybe some of the work that we're doing, and that when we were younger, we were not only talented in a certain area, but that life took us on these turns. So you even mentioned yourself, you had some difficult times, and then that brought out more spiritual discipline and empowerment with you. Do you see the question I'm asking? Because apparently I haven't asked the question yet.
Well, I would say, from what I'm hearing, is trauma a common denominator for folks on this journey? Could be. For myself, I can't acknowledge for myself any traumatic events other than just knowing I was different and not feeling seen, which I guess could be experienced traumatically by some folks. I didn't have like a traumatic event that I can point to, but I think it's that sensitivity. I think when you are highly sensitive, you can experience things more deeply. And some of us might have experienced trauma in our lifetime, some may not. But I think that heightened sensitivity is a common denominator from my perspective that brings people to this work. And that gives you, at a very early age, there is something more than just this flesh and bone. And I love the religious science teachings, because one of their tenets is what connects us is not matter, what connects us is consciousness. And what a different world we'd be living in if we all realized what connects us to each other is energy, consciousness, not this physical bag of water that we're walking around, not our homes, not our cars. It's consciousness. We're all part of that source consciousness. And if we all got that, and we all knew that I am part of source consciousness, how much more powerful do I feel? What more is possible for me when I realize that and internalize that and feel that I am one with this consciousness. I am not separate. Given that, what do I choose to do? What do I choose to create? And it kind of flips the switch. And neuroscientists will also say that, the old saying is seeing is believing, but neuroscientists would flip that. They would say believing is seeing, meaning based on what you believe, you will see and experience the world based on what you believe. And your brain actively seeks out what supports what you already believe. So if you believe that no one in the world likes you, then that's what you'll experience, because your brain's going to pay attention to all those times where people appeared to not like you. And once I think people understand that, oh, I need to work on my belief system, how I see the world, that will impact my experience. There's some self-responsibility there, and it's not like a easy light switch that I can flip to change from off to on. But once I have that awareness, I can then gain some momentum and reclaim some of the power that I'm losing. And again, realizing what connects us is consciousness. We're all energy. It's not matter. So important.
Yeah. And it empowers us to recognize we can co-create, and we can take those thoughts, turn them into things that are positive and relevant for an easier way of living in the world.
So many of us create from reaction rather than from a seed thought. We're reacting to all the things in our environment. We're bombarded with advertising, media, world events, family members, work stuff, that we're always creating from reacting. We're reacting from everything versus taking the time out and saying, I know all that stuff is going on. What do I choose to create from scratch? Without response to anything else, what do I want to create? And there's, again, more power that comes from creating from within versus creating from reaction. And that's an important distinction. I think it's helpful for people to be aware of.
Yeah. And it's very much in line with a lot of those early laws and our principles in spiritualism, isn't it?
Absolutely. I love when science and spirit come together. One of the things I love about spiritualism, depending on which church you might go to, but those blue hymnals inside the principles, one of them is, we believe in infinite intelligence. What a wonderful, freeing thought. It's infinite intelligence. There's not a personified being judging me one way or the other. I am one with that source energy. It is infinite. That's what the game is. And how much shame can be released from feeling judged by some greater power. What freedom comes from that and being part of that infinite intelligence, knowing that I'm eternal. Oh, if I'm eternal, that gives me power. I can live in less fear, knowing that my essence continues. After my body transitions, I'm still here. So much freedom. Life is much more fun, much more magical, much more powerful. There's a theme to all my work, is really helping people claim and know their own power to use for themselves, and having a healthy relationship with their own power and claiming who they are, being authentic and creating the life that they want, whether it's at work, at home, or at play. I feel like I've been on a pulpit, so I'm sorry if I'm on my soapbox, but this is
love it. It's a
this is
wonderful
cool stuff.
way for us to wrap up. That was beautiful. Well
Great.
said. Yeah, very empowering.
Yeah, it's great to gaze at your smile, Kathleen. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to. I haven't seen you much in the Dale these summers. We passed each other a little bit this summer, and I was like, oh, I've been wanting to call you. So I'm so glad that we had this opportunity. Those of you listening, I highly encourage you to take a look at Dan's website and to share this with others. There's so much here that he can be a support for. You can find Dan at danjohnson.me, danjohnson.me, and that's a website. And also Dan has mentioned a few other places that you can find him, and I will have those listed in the little box below where I've posted this video. So Dan, I just want to thank you again for coming today. This has been fabulous.
What a pleasure, Kathleen. Anytime. I adore you and your energy, and thank you for just being a bright light in this world. I sincerely mean that.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So visitors and listeners and viewers, we want to thank you for joining us today, and be sure to join in a couple of weeks when we interview someone else. For now, have a lovely, lovely day. Bye-bye.